The stars looked different from the observation deck of the UES Prometheus. Captain Elena Vasquez stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the darkness of space stretch endlessly before them. 3 days had passed since they left Earth's orbit, and everything seemed perfect. Too perfect, she would later realize. The Prometheus was humanity's pride and joy. 200 crew members worked day and night on the massive ship, which carried the hopes of 8 billion people back home. They were going to prove something important to the galaxy. Humanity deserved a place among the stars. The Galactic Concordat had invited them, offered friendship, and even helped build the quantum fold drives that made this journey possible. Elena walked through the corridors, nodding at crew members who saluted as she passed. In the engineering bay, Chief Engineer Marcus Chen was running diagnostics on the fold drive systems. He was a careful man, someone who checked everything 3 times before calling it safe. That's why Elena trusted him completely. "How are we looking, Marcus?" she asked, stepping into the bright lights of the engine room. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead. The drives hummed with power, creating a sound that felt like music to anyone who understood machines. "Everything reads normal, Captain. The Zelthrians really knew what they were doing with these drives. We're running at 98% efficiency." Elena smiled. The Zelthrians were their main contact in the Concordat, a species that looked like tall, thin humans with silver skin and 3 fingers on each hand. They had been nothing but helpful during the construction phase. Their lead engineer, Krixtal, had personally overseen the drive installation. "Keep monitoring it," Elena said. "I want to know if anything changes, even by 0.5%. Marcus nodded, turning back to his displays. Elena continued her inspection, visiting the medical bay where Dr. Sarah Okonkwo was organizing supplies. Then, the navigation center, where First Officer Liu was plotting their course to the nearest Concordat station. Everything was going according to plan. Then the alarm started screaming. Elena was in her quarters when the ship lurched violently to one side. She grabbed the desk to keep from falling as red lights flooded the room. Her communication panel exploded with voices, all talking at once, all panicked. "Captain, to the bridge." That was Liu's voice, tight with fear. Elena ran through corridors that were now flashing red and white. Crew members were rushing in different directions, some toward emergency stations, others helping injured colleagues who had been thrown against walls when the ship shook. The artificial gravity was fluctuating, making each step feel wrong. Displays showed systems failing across the entire ship. Navigation was down. Life support was at 60% and dropping. And worst of all, the quantum fold drive was showing readings that made no sense. "Report!" Elena shouted over the noise of alarms. Liu's face was pale. "Captain, we've got catastrophic failures in 17 major systems. The fold drive just collapsed. We dropped out of quantum space in the middle of nowhere." "Where's nowhere?" "The Kepler abyss." Liu pulled up a star map. Empty space stretched in every direction. No habitable systems for 10,000 light-years. No space stations. No colonies. Nothing. Elena felt ice in her stomach, but her voice stayed calm. "Get Marcus up here. Now." Marcus arrived 5 minutes later, his uniform torn, and a cut bleeding above his left eye. "Captain, you need to see this." He pulled up diagnostic data on the main screen. Elena wasn't an engineer, but she had learned enough to understand what she was seeing. The failures weren't random. They had happened in a specific sequence, one triggering the next, like dominoes falling in a pattern. "This was deliberate," Marcus said quietly. "Someone planned this." Dr. Okonkwo's voice came through the communication system. "Captain, we have another problem. I'm picking up strange energy readings from the engine core. You need to see this." Elena, Marcus, and Liu made their way to the engine room, now lit by emergency lights that cast everything in shades of red and orange. The quantum fold drive, which should have been completely dead, was glowing. A ball of impossible light pulsed at its center, growing slowly but steadily. "What is that?" Elena asked. Sarah shook her head, her dark eyes wide with confusion and something that might have been wonder. "I don't know. By every law of physics I understand, it shouldn't exist. The drive should have exploded or just shut down. Instead, it's creating some kind of sustained reaction. A singularity, maybe, but stable, which should be impossible." Marcus was already pulling up data, his fingers flying across his portable terminal. His face went from confused to angry to absolutely furious in the space of seconds. "Captain," he said, his voice shaking, "I found something in the system logs. Hidden code, buried deep in the drive's operating system. It activated 3 days after launch, exactly as programmed." "What kind of code?" "Quantum bombs, microscopic devices built into the drive assembly itself. They were supposed to make the whole thing collapse instantly, killing everyone on board." He looked up at Elena. "The Zelthrians put them there. This was always a trap." The words hung in the air like poison. Elena felt her world shifting. Everything they had believed, all the friendship and cooperation, had been lies. The Concordat never wanted humanity to join them. They wanted humanity dead. "Can you prove it?" she asked. Marcus pulled up schematics, comparing the original human designs to what was actually built. There, hidden in technical specifications that only an expert would notice, were the bombs. Small, elegant, and absolutely deadly. "The only reason we're alive," Marcus continued, "is that they underestimated human engineering tolerances. Our ships are built tougher than most species. The bombs didn't destroy the drive completely. Instead, they created that." He pointed at the glowing singularity. Lou was already working at a communications terminal. "Captain, I'm picking up a transmission. It's encoded, but I can crack it." Her fingers danced across the controls. A moment later, voices filled the bridge, speaking in the musical language of the Zelthrians. The ship's computer translated. "Confirmation received. The human ship has been eliminated. No survivors expected. All evidence will be lost in the abyss. The Concordat thanks you for removing this potential threat." Another voice responded, this one deeper. "Excellent. The humans showed too much promise, too much creativity. Like the others, they had to be dealt with before they became dangerous." Elena's hands clenched into fists. "The others?" Liu pulled up more data from the transmission. "They're talking about previous incidents, species names I don't recognize. 14 of them over the past 2,000 years. Every time a new species showed advanced technology or innovative thinking, the Concordat sabotaged them, stranded them, let them die in deep space where no one would ever know." The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of failing systems and the pulse of the impossible singularity in the engine room. Elena looked around at her crew. These people had trusted her. Now they were stranded, betrayed, and facing slow death as their ship fell apart around them. But they were also still alive. And that singularity, that impossible thing that should not exist, was still growing. An idea began forming in her mind, dangerous and desperate. "How long before our life support fails completely?" she asked. Sarah checked her readings. 3 weeks, maybe 4 if we shut down non-essential sections. "And that thing?" Elena pointed at the singularity. "How long before it consumes the ship or explodes?" Sarah hesitated. "I honestly don't know, Captain. It's feeding on dark energy, converting it to matter energy at ratios that break physics. It could burn out tomorrow, or keep growing forever." Elena straightened her shoulders and addressed her bridge crew. "They left us here to die. They thought we'd give up, drift until the oxygen ran out, and become just another secret buried in the dark." She looked each of them in the eye. "They were wrong. We're going to survive, and we're going to make sure they regret every second of this betrayal." How? Lou asked. Elena stared at the pulsing light of the singularity on the monitor. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to take something broken and turn it into something they'll never forget. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo had not slept in 36 hours. Her eyes burned with exhaustion, but the data in front of her was too fascinating, too terrifying to look away from. The singularity continued to pulse in the engine core, and with every scan, she discovered something new that made her question everything she thought she knew about physics. The science team had set up portable equipment around the damaged fold drive. Screens displayed readings that fluctuated wildly, showing energy patterns that should not exist in normal space. Sarah's team consisted of 12 physicists, all of them brilliant, all of them staring at the same impossible data with expressions of confusion and wonder. It's stable, said Dr. Chen Wei, a young quantum physicist who specialized in fold drive mechanics. That's what I can't understand. Every simulation says this configuration should collapse in microseconds. Instead, it's been running for 4 days and actually getting stronger. Sarah nodded, making notes on her tablet. The singularity was converting dark energy directly into matter and energy at impossible ratios. Dark energy made up most of the universe, but was normally impossible to harness. It just existed, pushing space apart, unreachable and untouchable. Yet somehow, the Zelthrian sabotage had created conditions that tapped into it. The Zelthrians made a mistake, Sarah said quietly. Their bombs were designed to overload our drive instantly. They calculated based on their own engineering standards, which prioritize safety and predictable outcomes. But humans build things differently. Dr. Chen Wei understood immediately. We over-engineer everything. Triple redundancy, extra safety margins, systems that can handle twice the load they're rated for. It's because we're still learning, still scared of failure. Exactly. Their bombs hit our drive, but our safety systems fought back. The result was this perfect storm of conditions that created a stable tear in space-time. No rational species would ever build something with these tolerances, because it's too dangerous. We did it by accident, through ignorance and paranoia. The implications were staggering. The Galactic Concordat had advanced science that humanity could barely understand. They had faster ships, better weapons, technology that looked like magic. But their science was built on safe principles, established theories, controlled experimentation. They never pushed boundaries too far, because they knew the dangers. Humans didn't know any better. And sometimes, ignorance created miracles. Captain Vasquez called a command meeting 8 hours later, in the conference room adjacent to the bridge. The room was cold, because they had shut down heating to non-essential areas to conserve power. 12 people sat around the table, their breath visible in the chill air. Elena stood at the head of the table, looking tired but determined. Dr. Okonkwo, tell us what we're dealing with. Sarah activated a holographic display in the center of the table. The singularity appeared, a swirling ball of light and energy that hurt to look at directly. This is a sustained quantum singularity feeding on dark energy. It's growing at a steady rate, approximately 0.3% per hour. At current rates, it will consume the ship's engine core in 22 days. Can we shut it down? Asked First Officer Liu. No, Sarah said simply. There's nothing to shut down. It's sustaining itself now. It exists outside our control. Commander Jackson Hayes, the weapons officer, leaned forward. He was a military man, late 40s, with scars on his hands from previous ship postings. What happens when it consumes the engine core? I don't know, Sarah admitted. Best case, it burns out and collapses. Worst case, it continues growing and eventually consumes the entire ship, then continues expanding into space. Silence filled the room. Everyone understood what that meant. They would be dead long before the singularity became a threat to anyone else, but the idea of creating something that could potentially grow forever was terrifying. Marcus spoke up from his position near the door. I've been studying the energy output. The singularity is producing massive amounts of exotic particles and radiation. Most of it is harmless, just bleeding off into space. But some of the energy could theoretically be harnessed. As a power source? Elena asked. Maybe, Marcus said carefully. But I was thinking of something else. He paused, choosing his words with care. The energy signature is similar to what our weapon systems use, just millions of times more powerful. If we could focus it, direct it somehow. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Commander Hayes sat up straighter. You're talking about a weapon. I'm talking about survival, Marcus corrected. We're stranded in the abyss with failing systems and enemies who want us dead. If they think the sabotage failed, they'll send ships to finish the job. Elena looked at each person around the table. She saw fear in some faces, calculation in others, and anger in most. They had been betrayed, left to die in the dark, and now they had a choice. Die quietly or fight back with whatever they had. Long-range sensors, Elena said, looking at Lou. Anything? Lou's expression answered before her words did. A Concordat fleet, 12 ships, 3 weeks out, and heading straight for us. They're coming to make sure there are no survivors. The room erupted in conversation, voices overlapping in anger and fear. Elena let them talk for a moment, then raised her hand for silence. Dr. Okonkwo, she said, is it possible to weaponize the singularity? Sarah hesitated. This was the line, she knew. Once crossed, there was no going back. Theoretically, yes. If we could create focusing arrays to direct the energy output, we might be able to generate a beam weapon of unprecedented power. But Captain, we're talking about forces we don't fully understand. The risks are already here, Elena finished. We're already dead if we do nothing. At least this gives us a chance. A chance to do what? Asked Lieutenant Kim from Intelligence. Even if we destroy the fleet coming for us, the Concordat has thousands of ships. We're one damaged vessel with 200 people. We can't fight the entire galaxy. But we can make them think twice about underestimating humans again. Commander Hayes stood up, his military bearing making him seem taller than he was. I've seen the data. That singularity has enough power to level a planet if we could control it. The Concordat uses conventional weapons, plasma and kinetics. They've never needed anything stronger, because their enemies all play by the same rules. They've never faced something like this. Dr. Chen Wei spoke quietly from the corner. Building this weapon would require reconfiguring the entire ship. We'd have to strip systems, reroute power, essentially turn the Prometheus from an exploration vessel into a weapon platform. Many of us would likely die in the process, even if we succeed. Elena looked around the table once more. I won't order this. It has to be a choice. We vote. Everyone on this ship gets a say. Do we try to limp home and hope they let us live? Or do we take this impossible thing they created by mistake and turn it into something they'll never forget? The vote took 4 hours. Every crew member had their say, voices recorded and counted carefully. When the results came in, Elena read them aloud over the ship-wide communication system. 187 in favor of weaponizing the singularity. 13 against. The motion carries. In the engineering bay, Marcus was already drawing up plans. The ship would have to be torn apart and rebuilt around the singularity. Every available resource would be dedicated to creating focusing arrays, power conduits, and targeting systems. They would sacrifice life support in outer sections, strip hull plating for raw materials, and push their remaining systems far beyond safe limits. Sarah stood next to him, looking at the schematics. We're building something that violates every safety protocol ever written. Marcus smiled grimly. That's what makes it human. The Concordat builds safe, predictable technology. We build things that scare us and hope we can control them. Sometimes we succeed. And when we don't, then at least we went down fighting. Over the next 3 days, the Prometheus transformed. Cargo bays became capacitor banks. Corridors were stripped of plating to create the skeletal framework of focusing arrays. The AI core was reprogrammed from exploration and research algorithms to weapons calculations and targeting solutions. Crew members worked in shifts, sleeping in their suits because heat was being redirected to power the construction. 40 crew members volunteered to move to the outer sections where life support had been shut down. They wore environmental suits around the clock, working in freezing darkness to build the weapon that might save them all. 6 people died in accidents when equipment failed. The crew held brief memorial services and continued working. On day 19, with the Concordat fleet 4 days away, they were ready to test. The target was a dead moon orbiting a brown dwarf star 3 million kilometers away. Sarah had set up sensors to record every aspect of the firing. Marcus manned the weapons console, his hands steady despite the enormity of what they were about to do. Elena gave the order, fire. Power flowed from the singularity through kilometers of focusing arrays. The ship groaned and shook as energy beyond comprehension channeled through systems never designed for such loads. Then, a beam of pure white light erupted from the Prometheus, crossing the distance to the moon in seconds. The moon didn't explode. It didn't shatter or vaporize. It simply ceased to exist. A perfect sphere of nothing appeared where rock and ice had been, then collapsed silently. The moon was gone, deleted from reality as if it had never existed at all. The bridge was completely silent as the crew stared at what they had created. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. My God, what have we done? Elena stood perfectly still, her face showing no emotion. Inside, she felt the weight of the moment. They had built something terrible, something that erased matter from existence. The Concordat had tried to murder them, and in response, humanity had created an apocalypse. We've given ourselves a chance, Elena said quietly. Now, let's make sure we use it. The Concordat fleet was 3 days away. The Prometheus no longer looked like a ship. In 3 weeks, the crew had transformed it into something between a weapon and a nightmare. Hull plating hung open like broken ribs, exposing the glowing singularity at its heart. Cables and conduits ran across surfaces like veins, pulsing with power that made the air taste of metal and ozone. Anyone looking at it would know immediately that something had gone terribly wrong here, or terribly right, depending on perspective. Marcus Chen stood in what used to be Cargo Bay 3, now converted into the primary capacitor bank. Massive coils wrapped around the space, storing energy bled carefully from the singularity. The temperature here was always too hot, even with cooling systems running at maximum. Sweat ran down his face as he checked connections for the 100th time. How much longer? Asked Lieutenant Ramirez, one of the engineering team who had volunteered for the most dangerous work. Marcus consulted his tablet, watching power levels climb steadily. 12 hours to full charge, maybe less. The singularity is feeding faster now. He didn't say what they both knew, that faster feeding meant less time before the ship was consumed. Every hour brought them closer to the edge. Throughout the ship, similar scenes played out. In the Weapons Control Center, Commander Hayes drilled his team on targeting solutions and firing sequences. They had one chance, maybe two if they were lucky. Every shot had to count. His people worked with grim determination, faces lit by the glow of tactical displays. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo spent her time studying the singularity's behavior, trying to understand the impossible thing they had created. She had discovered something fascinating and terrifying. By feeding different materials into the singularity, they could control the type of energy it produced. Organic matter creates thermal radiation, she explained to Elena during a briefing. Heavy metals produce exotic particles, and when we fed it antimatter from our fuel reserves, she pulled up the test results. It generated space-time distortions, actual ripples in the fabric of reality. Elena studied the data. not fully understanding the mathematics, but grasping the implications. "Can we use that?" "We already are," Sarah said. "The beam that destroyed the test moon used antimatter feed. That's why the matter didn't just explode. It was removed from space-time entirely. The singularity created a bubble of nothing, a spot where physics simply stopped working." The words should have been impossible. They violated everything humanity had learned about science. But the proof glowed in their engine core, and the empty space where a moon used to be proved it worked. In the medical bay, Dr. Chen Wei treated injuries from the construction work. Burns, broken bones, radiation sickness from working too close to the singularity. They had lost 6 people during construction, and another 12 were seriously injured. She worked with supplies that were running low, in a facility that was barely heated, and she never complained. Everyone on board knew what they were fighting for. The Concordat fleet drew closer. Intelligence Officer Kim had managed to decrypt more of their communications, and what she found made the crew's blood boil. The aliens spoke casually about the extermination, discussing it the way someone might talk about taking out trash. There was no guilt, no hesitation. To them, destroying the Prometheus was simply pest control. "They've done this before," Kim reported to the command staff. "I found references to 14 other incidents, species that showed too much innovation, too much potential. The Concordat invited them to join, helped them build ships, then sabotaged them in deep space. No witnesses, no evidence, no guilt." First Officer Liu slammed her hand on the table. "They're murderers, serial killers on a galactic scale." "Yes," Elena said simply, "which is why we can't fail. If we die, they'll just keep doing this to others." Commander Hayes pulled up tactical data on the approaching fleet. 12 ships. The flagship is the Eternal Harmony, a Zelthrian heavy cruiser. Admiral Thexvor commanding. He's the one who oversaw the sabotage of our drives. Elena memorized the name. Thexvor. The alien who had smiled and shaken her hand while planning her murder. The one who had personally approved the quantum bombs hidden in their engines. If they lived through this, she would make sure he understood what it meant to betray humanity. The final hours before contact were spent in preparation. Non-essential systems were shut down completely. The Singularity was fed the last of their antimatter reserves, bringing it to peak output. Crew members who weren't needed for the battle were moved to the most protected sections of the ship, wrapped in emergency suits in case of hull breaches. Elena walked through the ship one last time. She saw exhausted faces, frightened faces, but also determined ones. These people had been selected as humanity's best and brightest, sent to represent their species to the galaxy. Instead, they had been betrayed and left to die. They had taken their broken ship and turned it into something the galaxy had never seen. In the observation deck, now stripped of everything except the transparent hull panels, Elena found Sarah standing alone, staring at the stars. "Having second thoughts?" Elena asked quietly. Sarah shook her head. "No. I'm just thinking about what we're about to do. We built a weapon that erases matter from existence. We're going to use it to kill thousands of people. Even if they deserve it, even if it's survival, the magnitude of it is overwhelming." "I know," Elena said. "I've thought about nothing else for 3 days. But they made this choice when they put bombs in our engines. They decided our lives were worthless. Now they get to learn that worthless things can still bite back." Sarah smiled without humor. "Humans have always been good at that, taking our weaknesses and turning them into weapons. The Concordat thinks we're primitive and desperate. They just don't understand. That makes us dangerous." The Concordat fleet arrived right on schedule, dropping out of fold space exactly where Kim's calculations predicted. 12 ships in formation, weapon systems powering up, sensor arrays sweeping the area for debris. They expected to find wreckage and maybe some bodies frozen in space. Instead, they found the Prometheus waiting for them. Admiral Thexvor's face appeared on the communication screen. He looked like most Zelthrians, tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to glow in the light. His three-fingered hands were folded elegantly in front of him. He looked surprised to see humans alive. "Impossible," he said, speaking in his musical language, while the computer translated. "You should be dead." Elena stood on the bridge, her uniform clean and pressed, despite everything. She wanted these aliens to see a human captain, professional and unbowed. "You made a mistake. Several, actually. First, you underestimated human engineering. Second, you left us alive long enough to get angry. Third, you came back to gloat." Thexvor's expression shifted to something like amusement. "It hardly matters. Your ship is crippled. You are stranded. I am offering you one chance to surrender. We will make your deaths quick." "No," Elena said simply. "I don't think so." She nodded to Commander Hayes, who entered the firing command. The Prometheus unleashed hell. The singularity beam crossed 50,000 kilometers in less than a second. The Eternal Harmony, the flagship of the Concordat fleet, sat directly in its path. For a moment, the massive ship was outlined in white light. Then it simply stopped existing. A perfect sphere of nothing appeared where 3,000 aliens had been alive a moment before. The sphere collapsed, and there was only empty space. The Concordat fleet's communication channels exploded with panic. Their weapons were designed for civilized warfare, for shield depletion and controlled damage. They had never faced something that simply deleted targets from reality. Half the fleet tried to run immediately, their ships breaking formation and desperately charging their full drives to escape. The other half opened fire on the Prometheus, plasma beams and kinetic missiles filling the space between the two forces. The Prometheus was not built for this kind of punishment. Hull breaches opened across 3 decks, as plasma burned through damaged armor. Kinetic rounds punched through weakened sections, exposing corridors to vacuum. Alarms screamed as pressure dropped, and crew members scrambled to seal off compromised areas. "Casualties," Elena shouted over the noise. 40 dead in Section 7 through 12, Lou reported, her voice tight. "Hull integrity at 60%. Marcus's voice came through from engineering. "Captain, we can fire again, but it's going to cost us. I need to reroute power from life support to the capacitors. We'll lose heat and oxygen in half the ship." Elena didn't hesitate. "Do it. Target the 2 destroyers on our flank." The second firing consumed power from systems all across the ship. Lights dimmed to emergency levels. The temperature dropped instantly as heating systems shut down, but the beam lanced out again, splitting into 2 focus streams. Both Concordat destroyers vanished, deleted from existence, like mistakes erased from paper. 9 ships remained. 3 were already running, their full drives charging desperately. 6 continued firing, their commanders either too brave or too stupid to understand what they were facing. "Third firing," Elena ordered. "Target the carrier group." This time, the ship groaned like a living thing. Metal screamed as the singularity pulled more power than the focusing arrays were designed to handle. One array overloaded and exploded, killing the 5 crew members working to keep it stable. But the beam fired, wider this time and less focused. It caught a Concordat carrier and 2 escort ships, erasing them all in a wave of white light. 6 ships left. All of them were running now, full drives charging, trying desperately to escape. Elena looked at Marcus's readouts. They had enough power for 1 more shot, maybe 2 if they were lucky. But the ship was falling apart. They had minutes before critical systems failed completely. "Pursuit course," she ordered. "We can't let them report back." What followed was a chase across 3 star systems. The Prometheus, held together by emergency force fields and the desperate skill of its crew, hunted the fleeing Concordat ships like a wounded predator chasing prey. The aliens were faster, their ships undamaged, but every time they slowed to charge their fold drives, the Prometheus caught up. The fourth firing caught two ships trying to fold away. The fifth consumed the last of the antimatter reserves and killed the power to the remaining life support systems. The ship was now running on emergency batteries, and the desperate hope that the singularity wouldn't consume them before they finished the job. 3 ships left, and the Prometheus could barely maneuver. Elena made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Feed the singularity everything we have left," she ordered. "All remaining fuel, all spare materials, everything." Marcus understood what she was asking. "Captain, that will destabilize it. We're talking about a massive energy release." "I know," Elena said. "Do it anyway." The crew fed the singularity everything that wasn't essential for survival. The ship mass decreased as material was converted to energy, and the singularity grew, its light becoming almost painful to look at, its power building to catastrophic levels. The final shot wasn't a beam. It was a wave, a tsunami of reality deletion that propagated outward from the Prometheus in an expanding sphere. It caught all 3 fleeing ships, and it kept going, washing over dead moons and asteroid fields, erasing everything in its path for 1,000,000 kilometers before finally dissipating. The Prometheus drifted in the sudden silence. The singularity, pushed beyond its limits, finally collapsed. The glow faded from the engine core. Emergency systems struggled to keep the atmosphere breathable. Elena did a count. 89 crew members remained alive, out of 200. The ship was a wreck, barely holding together, but they had done it. They had destroyed an entire Concordat fleet. Then, long-range sensors picked up something new. Lieutenant Kim's face went pale as she read the data. "Captain," she said quietly, "we have a problem. A big one." On the screen appeared the sensor reading of a Concordat armada. 200 ships, converging on their position from multiple directions. The galaxy had noticed. The Prometheus hung in space like a broken promise. Hull breaches gaped open across its surface. Power flickered in sections that should have been dark. The singularity that had given them their terrible weapon was now just a cooling mass of exotic matter in the dead engine core. 89 crew members remained alive, and every single one of them knew they were looking at their tomb. Elena stood on the bridge, studying the sensor data that showed 200 Concordat ships approaching from multiple vectors. They had 3 days, maybe 4, before the armada arrived. The crew had already started calling it the Death Fleet, and nobody tried to pretend it was anything else. "Options," Elena said to her command staff. They were gathered in the conference room, which was now so cold that their breath fogged the air. Power was too precious to waste on comfort. First Officer Liu spoke first. "We can't fight. The singularity is dead. Even if we could restart it, we don't have the materials to feed it. We're running on emergency batteries that will last maybe a week." Commander Hayes nodded. "Our weapons systems are down. Hull integrity is at 30%. Life support is failing in half the ship. We're not a warship anymore. We're barely a derelict." Dr. Sarah Okonkwo had been quiet, staring at her data tablet. Now she looked up, and her expression made Elena's stomach tighten. "There's one option. We could overload what's left of the singularity completely. Feed it the ship's reactor core, all remaining fuel, everything. The explosion would propagate through dark energy networks." "How big?" Marcus asked quietly. "Big enough to sterilize a dozen star systems," Sarah said. "Maybe more. The dark energy cascade could spread farther than we can calculate. It would be the largest explosion in galactic history." The words fell like stones. Not just the Concordat fleet, but innocent civilians on planets throughout this sector. Species that had nothing to do with the betrayal. Children, families, entire civilizations erased because humanity chose revenge over restraint. Lieutenant Kim spoke up from the corner. I've been analyzing the intelligence data we captured. The armada includes ships from 17 different species. Most of them probably don't even know about the sabotage program. They're just following orders, defending what they think is a threat. Commander Hayes leaned back in his chair. But some of them do know. The Selthrians certainly do. And the Concordat leadership. They've been doing this for 2,000 years. 14 species before us. How many more will there be after we're gone? The argument went back and forth. Revenge versus morality. Survival versus genocide. Every person in the room understood they were discussing the extinction of billions, and the weight of it pressed down like gravity. Elena let them talk, watching their faces, understanding their pain and anger and fear. These were good people, forced into an impossible situation. Finally, she raised her hand for silence. No, she said simply. We don't become monsters. Not even for survival. Not even for revenge. Hayes looked frustrated. Then what do we do, Captain? Roll over and die quietly? Let them win? No, Elena said again. We send a message. Not just to the Concordat, but to everyone they've ever hurt. We make sure the galaxy knows what happened here. Marcus understood first. You want to broadcast everything. The sabotage, the battle, all of it. More than that, Elena said, turning to Sarah. Can you transmit the specifications for the singularity weapon, the full technical data? You want to give the weapon to everyone. I want to give it to everyone the Concordat has ever wronged, Elena corrected. They've been using the Abyss as their execution ground for 2,000 years. How many species did they claim to help, then sabotage? How many ships are still drifting out here, dead crews frozen in the dark? Kim pulled up historical data from the intercepted communications. At least 14 confirmed incidents. Probably more that weren't documented. If even half those species survived somehow, hid their remaining ships, went underground. Then they're out there, Elena finished, scared, alone, thinking they're the only ones who know the truth about the Concordat. We can change that. The plan came together quickly. Engineer Marcus would rig their communications array to piggyback on the dying singularity's exotic radiation. The signal would propagate through dark energy networks, reaching farther than any conventional transmission. Every species in this sector of the galaxy would receive it. Sarah and her team compiled the data package. Everything. The sabotage evidence, the battle recordings, the intercepted Concordat communications discussing the extermination program, and most importantly, the complete technical specifications for the singularity weapon. How to build it, how to control it, how to turn the Concordat's own sabotage into a weapon. This is dangerous, Sarah warned as she finished the package. We're giving every species in the galaxy the knowledge to build planet killers. Yes, Elena agreed, but we're also giving them the truth, and the choice of what to do with it. That's more than the Concordat ever gave us. Lieutenant Kim worked on the message itself, crafting words that would accompany the data. Elena insisted on delivering it personally. She stood in front of a camera, wearing her torn and stained uniform, looking like exactly what she was, a survivor of betrayal. We are humanity, she began, her voice steady and clear. We were invited to join the Galactic Concordat. We trusted them. They betrayed us. They put bombs in our ship and left us to die in the Kepler Abyss. She paused, letting the words sink in. They have done this before, 14 times in 2,000 years, maybe more. Species that showed promise, innovation, potential. The Concordat called them friends, then murdered them in the dark where no one would know. The camera showed the damaged bridge behind her, the exhausted crew at their stations. We survived. We built a weapon from their sabotage, something that should never exist. We destroyed their fleet. Now they're sending an armada to finish the job. Elena's expression hardened. We're transmitting everything, the evidence of their crimes, the data on how we survived, and the specifications for the weapon we created. We're giving it to everyone they've ever wronged, to every species they've labeled as too dangerous, too innovative, too free. She leaned closer to the camera. The Concordat wants to control the galaxy by controlling technology, by deciding who gets to advance and who gets eliminated. They think they're keeping everyone safe. They're wrong. They're just protecting their own power. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. You want to keep the galaxy safe? You should have left us alone. You should have left all of us alone. Now everyone knows what you are, and they have the tools to fight back. The transmission was ready. Marcus stood at the communications console, his hand hovering over the activation switch. Captain, once we do this, there's no taking it back. We'll be changing the entire balance of power in the galaxy. Do it. The signal burst outward, riding waves of exotic radiation that propagated through dark energy networks at faster than light speeds. It would reach every corner of this galactic sector within hours. The truth, spreading like wildfire, impossible to stop or suppress. 2 days later, the Concordat Armada arrived. 200 ships dropped out of fold space in perfect formation, a display of overwhelming force designed to intimidate and crush. Their sensors swept over the Prometheus, cataloging the damage, confirming what they already believed. This wreck posed no threat. The lead ship, a massive Concordat dreadnought, opened communications. The face that appeared on screen was not Zelfrian. This was a Vraxis, a species that looked like thick-bodied centaurs with 4 arms and crystalline eyes. High Chancellor Varix, the supreme commander of Concordat forces. Human ship Prometheus, he said, in a voice like grinding stones. You have committed acts of war against the Galactic Concordat. You have destroyed 12 vessels and killed thousands. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed. Elena stood alone on the bridge. She had ordered the rest of the crew to the most protected sections of the ship. If this went badly, maybe a few would survive to be rescued. Maybe. High Chancellor, she said calmly, check your communications. You're receiving some interesting transmissions right about now. Varix's expression didn't change, but his eyes shifted as he received reports from his communication officers. Elena could imagine the chaos on his bridge as the intercepted data packets arrived, as the evidence of Concordat crimes spread through the fleet's information networks. Then something impossible happened. Fold space tore open all around the Armada. Dozens of rifts, ships emerging from nowhere. But these weren't Concordat vessels. They were old, damaged, cobbled together from parts that didn't match. They looked like refugees, because that's exactly what they were. The Kryn emerged first, 6 ships that looked like they'd been built in someone's garage from scavenged parts. The Dalathi followed, their vessels held together with external scaffolding and prayer. Then the Vrex, the Salthani, the Kor, species that had been declared extinct by the Concordat decades or centuries ago. They had survived. They had hidden in the dark places of the galaxy, too afraid to reveal themselves, thinking they were alone. And they had received humanity's message. The communication channels erupted in chaos. Ships from the Armada were broadcasting demands for explanation. Neutral species in the fleet, those who had joined the Concordat in good faith, were seeing evidence of sabotage and genocide. The coalition was fracturing in real time. A Kryn vessel hailed the Prometheus. The alien captain who appeared on screen was thin and tall, with skin like tree bark and too many fingers. She spoke in broken, heavily accented English that she must have learned from old Earth transmissions. Human ship, she said, struggling with the words. We thought we alone. You showed us wrong. Let us help. More transmissions came in. The Dalathi offering medical supplies. The Vrex sending repair teams. All the extinct species, the ones the Concordat had tried to erase, coming out of hiding to help the humans who had revealed the truth. High Chancellor Varix tried to restore order, but his authority was crumbling. 3 species withdrew their ships from the Armada immediately, their governments broadcasting condemnation of the sabotage program. Others demanded answers, investigations, accountability. The Kryn vessel maneuvered alongside the Prometheus, their airlock clanging against the damaged hull. Elena met them at the docking port with Marcus and Sarah. The Kryn captain was even taller in person, maybe 7 feet, moving with careful grace in the low gravity. She looked at Elena with eyes that had seen too much suffering, and she smiled. "Thank you," she said simply, the words clear despite her accent. 200 years we hide. 200 years we think our people extinct, our culture dead. You gave us hope. We repay favor. "How did you survive?" Sarah asked. "We ran. When the sabotage happened, we knew. We had, what is word? Paranoid. Yes, paranoid engineer. She discover bombs before they activate. We escape, but cannot go home. Concordats say we extinct. We let them believe. We survive in dark." The Kryn crew began transferring supplies and equipment. Their technology was outdated, their resources limited, but they gave freely. The other refugee species did the same. Within hours, the Prometheus had power again. Medical supplies, food, and most importantly, hope. On her ship, High Chancellor Varix watched as his fleet fell apart around him. 7 species had withdrawn completely. 14 more were demanding investigations. The neutral species who had believed the Concordat's lies were broadcasting their outrage across the galaxy. He could destroy the Prometheus easily. 200 ships could erase the wreck and everyone on it. But the damage was done. The truth was out there, spreading faster than he could suppress it. And if he fired now, he would only prove humanity's accusations. His career was over. The sabotage program was exposed. The Concordat, as he knew it, was finished. He closed the communication channel without another word. The Armada began to disperse, ships folding away in different directions as the coalition collapsed. Elena stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching the refugee ships cluster around them protectively. 89 humans had survived, but they weren't alone anymore. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. "Captain," Kim said quietly, "we did it. We actually did it." "Maybe," Elena said. "Or maybe we just started a war." She looked at the stars, wondering what came next. 6 months had passed since the battle, and the galaxy was unrecognizable. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on a balcony overlooking the city of Kreshna, the Kryn homeworld capital, watching ships come and go from the orbital platforms. Some were human designs, sleek and new, built in Sol Systems' expanding shipyards. Others were Kryn, Dolothi, Vrex, all the species that had been hiding for decades or centuries, now building openly again. The Galactic Concordat had collapsed, not violently, not with warfare, but through loss of trust. 7 species withdrew immediately after the truth came out. 14 more followed within weeks. The organization that had controlled galactic politics for 3,000 years was now a shadow of itself. Just 9 species clinging to old alliances and older lies. Elena wore civilian clothes now, not a captain's uniform. The Prometheus had been decommissioned, its hulk towed to a secure facility where it would be studied but never rebuilt. 89 crew members had survived the battle. 72 were still alive, recovered from their injuries, dealing with trauma in their own ways. Some had returned to Earth. Others stayed among the stars, working with the refugee species to build something new. The door behind her opened, and Dr. Sarah Okonkwo stepped out onto the balcony. She looked healthier now, the exhaustion and fear replaced with something calmer, though her eyes still carried the weight of what they had done. Thought I'd find you out here, Sarah said, joining Elena at the railing. The memorial service is in an hour. Elena nodded. They held services once a month for the 128 crew members who had died. The names were read aloud, their stories shared, their sacrifices remembered. It never got easier. How's the work going? Elena asked. Sarah's current project was collaborative research with scientists from 7 different species. They were studying quantum physics, full drive technology, and most importantly, ensuring that no one ever built another singularity weapon. The Prometheus's data had spread across the galaxy, but Sarah was working to make sure it came with warnings and safeguards. Slowly, Sarah admitted, the Dolothi have theories about dark energy that completely contradict our models, but their math works. The Vrex build ships using principles we barely understand. Everyone's sharing now, all the technology the Concordat kept separated and controlled. It's chaotic, but exciting. Below them, in the city streets, humans walked alongside aliens of a dozen species. Children played together in parks, where 6 months ago, none of this would have been possible. The refugee species had been terrified to reveal themselves, but humanity's message had changed everything. They weren't alone anymore. They didn't have to hide. Do you regret it? Any of it? Elena thought about the question seriously. They had killed thousands in the battle. They had unleashed knowledge of a terrible weapon. They had torn apart the galactic order that had stood for millennia. The consequences were still unfolding, and not all of them were good. I regret that it was necessary, Elena finally said. I regret every person who died, human and alien both. But no, I don't regret fighting back. They tried to murder us. They'd done it to 14 other species. Someone had to stop them. A Kryn child ran past below, laughing as she chased a ball made of woven grass. Her parents watched from a bench, relaxed in a way that the older Kryn never quite managed. That generation had grown up in hiding, always afraid, always watching for Concordat ships. Their children would grow up different. Marcus Chen appeared in the doorway. Captain, you have visitors, from Earth. Elena followed him inside to the meeting room. 3 people waited there, wearing the formal uniforms of the United Earth Council. The lead representative was Ambassador Chen, no relation to Marcus despite sharing a last name. She stood as Elena entered. Captain Vasquez, Ambassador Chen said formally, on behalf of Earth and all humanity, I bring greetings and gratitude. I'm not a captain anymore, Elena said, gesturing for them to sit. Just Elena. You'll always be the captain of the Prometheus, the ambassador said. The ship that changed everything. That's why we're here. The Council has approved construction of a new vessel, the UES Prometheus II. They want you to command it. Elena felt her stomach tighten. She'd been expecting this conversation, but hoping to avoid it. I'm not sure I'm the right person for that. You're exactly the right person, the ambassador insisted. The Prometheus II won't be a warship. It's an exploration vessel, like the original was meant to be. But this time, you won't be going alone. The Kryn are contributing engineers. The Dolothi are providing medical staff. 7 species working together to explore regions of space that were forbidden under Concordat rules. Marcus leaned forward. A real coalition. Not like the Concordat where one group controlled everything. This would be equals, sharing the risks and discoveries. It was tempting. The idea of exploring space the way they'd originally planned, before the betrayal, before everything went wrong. But Elena remembered the weight of command, the decisions that haunted her, the people who had died under her orders. I need to think about it, she said. The ambassador nodded. Of course, take all the time you need. The ship won't be ready for another year anyway. We just wanted you to know the offer is there. After they left, Elena returned to the balcony. Sarah joined her again, and they stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset. The Kryn sun was smaller than Earth's, casting the sky in shades of purple and deep blue. Are you going to take it? Sarah asked. I don't know, Elena admitted. Part of me wants to, Part of me thinks I've done enough damage. You saved billions, Sarah countered. The Concordat was going to keep killing any species that threatened their control. You stopped them. By almost becoming like them, Elena said quietly. We nearly chose genocide. If you hadn't talked me down, if we'd overloaded that singularity completely. But we didn't. That's what matters. We chose differently. Elena's personal communicator chimed. It was Lieutenant Kim from Intelligence, now working as a liaison between human and alien governments. Her message was brief but urgent. Need you at the research facility, now. Found something in the Prometheus wreckage. The facility was 30 kilometers outside the city, a converted Kryn military base that now housed the remains of the Prometheus. Elena, Sarah, and Marcus arrived to find Kim waiting with a team of engineers. They looked excited and nervous. What did you find? Elena asked. Kim led them through security to a laboratory where pieces of the fold drive were laid out like an archaeological dig. She pointed to a specific component, a crystalline matrix that had survived the singularity's collapse. We've been analyzing every piece of the sabotage, Kim explained, trying to understand exactly how the Zelthrians did it, and we found something impossible. She pulled up technical schematics on a large display. The quantum bombs were designed to trigger when the drive reached a specific energy threshold. But look at these tolerances. She highlighted sections of code buried in the drive's operating system. They're calibrated for human engineering standards, not Zelthrian. Marcus studied the data, his expression growing more puzzled. That's not possible. The Zelthrians designed these bombs. Why would they use our tolerances? Because someone wanted the sabotage to fail, Sarah said, understanding flooding through her. Or at least, to fail in a specific way. They knew how humans build things, knew we over-engineer everything. They set the bombs to trigger at levels that would destroy a Zelthrian ship, but might not completely destroy a human one. Kim nodded. There's more. We found a message hidden in the mathematical code, written in human mathematical notation, but using principles that wouldn't be developed for another 50 years based on our current understanding. Someone with knowledge of both human and Zelthrian technology left it there. It was beautiful in its simplicity, a proof in pure mathematics that could only be interpreted one way. Survive, fight, teach them fear. The room fell silent as they processed the implications. Someone inside the Concordat, someone with access to the highest levels of technology and planning, had deliberately sabotaged the sabotage. They had wanted humanity to survive. They had wanted the singularity to be created. They had planned for everything that happened. Who? Marcus asked. And why? We don't know, Kim said. The mathematical notation is unique. It doesn't match any known Concordat species. Whoever left this message was careful to hide their identity. Elena stared at the equations, feeling a chill run down her spine. Everything they had been through, the betrayal, the desperate fight, the weapon they'd created, all of it might have been orchestrated by someone they'd never even met. Someone who understood both human nature and Concordat politics well enough to predict exactly what would happen. What do we do with this information? Sarah asked. Elena thought carefully. They could go public, reveal that they might have been pawns in someone else's plan. But that would undermine everything they'd accomplished. The refugee species had come out of hiding because they believed in humanity's struggle, in the truth of their message. Learning it might have been manipulated could destroy that fragile alliance. We keep it quiet, Elena decided. Just the people in this room. We investigate carefully, try to find out who left that message, but we don't broadcast it. Not yet. The others agreed, though Marcus looked troubled. If someone could manipulate events this precisely, what else might they have planned? It was a good question with no good answer. The memorial service that evening was held in a grove of Kryn trees that grew in spiral patterns, their leaves chiming softly in the wind. All 72 surviving crew members attended, along with representatives from the refugee species. Names were read aloud, stories shared, grief expressed openly. Elena spoke last, as she always did. She talked about the crew they'd lost, their bravery, their sacrifice. She talked about the 128 people who had given everything so that the truth could survive. She didn't mention the hidden message, the possibility that they'd been guided by an unknown hand. Some burdens were meant for commanders alone. After the service, she walked alone through the grove, thinking about the offer to command the Prometheus II. A year ago, she would have accepted immediately. Now she understood the weight of command better. She understood what it meant to make decisions that killed people, even when those decisions were necessary. But she also understood something else. The galaxy had changed. Species that had been hiding in fear were building openly again. The Concordat's control was broken, and somewhere out there someone had believed enough in humanity's potential to risk everything on them surviving. Maybe that belief deserved to be honored. Maybe it deserved a captain willing to carry it forward. She found Sarah sitting on a bench carved from living wood, watching the stars emerge as darkness fell. "I'm going to accept the command," Elena said. Sarah smiled. "I know. I already volunteered to be Chief Science Officer." "The Prometheus II won't be like the first voyage," Elena warned. "We know the dangers now. We know what's out there." "Exactly," Sarah said. "Which is why we need to go." Someone went to enormous trouble to make sure we survived, to give us the tools to change the galaxy. We owe it to them, and to everyone who died, to see what comes next. They sat together as night fell completely, watching ships move between stars, carrying people and ideas and hope to places that had been dark for too long. The Concordat had tried to control the galaxy by controlling technology, by deciding who deserved to advance and who deserved to die. They had failed, and in their failure, they had unleashed something they could never have predicted. Humanity's stubborn refusal to die quietly, combined with the desperate hope of every species they had ever wronged. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the dark between stars, someone who had planned for this moment was watching, waiting to see what humanity would do next. Elena looked up at the unfamiliar constellations and smiled. They had survived. They had taught the Concordat to fear. Now came the harder part, teaching the galaxy to hope. The Prometheus II would launch in a year. This time, they would be ready. This time, they wouldn't be alone. And this time, no one would ever again underestimate what humans could do when pushed to the edge. The stars waited, full of mysteries and dangers and possibilities. Elena Vasquez, former captain of the UES Prometheus, future captain of the Prometheus II, was ready to meet them all.